Hello, I hope everyone's well and are enjoying the bank holiday as best you can. So, Michael Needham here, the author of Yellow Spaghetti, doing book talks on the book. Um, as you may have watched some of them. The subject matter tonight's a bit tough, a bit more serious. Um, I've decided to talk about bullying in the workplace. I really hadn't really considered talking about this section, but I think it relates quite well to dyspraxia and what have you. So this is page 55 in the book, and there's two parts to this. Whether I split them or put them together, I'm not sure, but let me see how the reading goes time wise. So after college and before college, actually, I was working in the local putting green. But my last season in the putting green finished suddenly. Having graduated from my college course, I decided to copy my friend Gary, who to this day has only ever had one job at Harrison's Ford Garage in Peebles. I managed to secure an interview at another Borders Ford Garage where I think my enthusiasm shone through, although I suspect someone perhaps got the job ahead of me and never managed to get through the early months. My persistence and a few chase up calls saying that I still hadn't heard if I got the job or not paid off when all of a sudden I got an amazing phone call saying that I'd secured the job. I had started to target I'd secured the very job that I started to target following my college graduation. So I was so nervous the first day. Although I loved driving, I was a fairly inexperienced driver. I was really worried about having to drive big cars and automatics, having never driven either. I was about 19 or 20 years old at this time, so I was quite young. The first day was a real challenge. The horrible senior salesman told me to come with him to the main Berwick garage. So they had a garage in Galashiels and the bigger one in Berwick upon Tweed. As this was the second branch that I was working at, I was to pick up an automatic Montego estate. It was automatic and an estate car and drive it back to Gala. I thought I was to wait on my colleague and follow him back, but no, apparently I was meant to have headed back right away. This was my first bad encounter with this bully. I got used to the car okay, although even though it was a fairly new Montego, it was a heap of shit. Sorry for the language. My one had an overheating engine and I could see the temperature gauge going mad, then hear a hissing noise. But my colleague hadn't even let me follow him back. He was flat out in a V6 Mondeo from the outset. This was back in 1993, 1994, roughly that time. So it's quite a while ago now. Somehow I limped back in one piece and I survived my first adventure. It was Ian, the sales manager, who recruited me, along with Jeff, the sales director. I also met the owner, Michael, and always got on with these guys. Ian soon jumped ship to a bigger Edinburgh dealership, and then I heard the really bad news that George, the nasty salesman, was to take over. I was making steady progress, but the limited training I had soon dried up more. The sales manager also seemed to want to take on more sales staff, I was making steady progress, steady sales, but I was kept from getting involved in all the different areas of the business. Generally, the sales manager would approve the trade-in valuations and the business manager would sort the finance. I think with proper support, I would have done a lot better. My manager, in my opinion, had fly-by-night, double-glazing type sales tactics, but essentially what he asked me to do was designed to ridicule me. He made me phone random people out of the phone book and actually say, I have a cryptic message that you need to see some lovely cars we have for sale. Obviously, I never made any sales through this. All it did was tarnish the brand, and he was just humiliating me. I think I reacted to his bullying and ended up in a bit of a huff. He realised he'd upset me, as he ended up following me to the cafe along from the garage one lunchtime. He apologised and said he would learn me better. I hadn't even found to be dyslexic at this stage, but the poor use of English, learn me better, made me chuckle slightly. Other dyspraxic tendencies included me several times. This is quite funny actually. Asking if I could help two folk that were actually our company buyers and drivers. So whenever I saw them in the forecourt, I didn't seem to recognise them for whatever reason, probably related to my dyspraxia, and asked them if I could help them find a car of their choice, which was really, really stupid, the fact I couldn't recognise them. It took a good 3 or 4 occasions of me asking if I could help them before it clicked who they were. So further humiliation took place, and despite my sales steadily improving, my boss told me he was interviewing people for my job. He was very specific about this. This was such a mean and disgusting move. I think he wanted me to quit there and then, but I never did. He told me to act as reception and greet the candidates and offer them a coffee. I had a polite nature about me and complied with the instructions. He then decided to take 2 of them on, and a week later he told me this would be my last week working there. I really pushed my performance, and on the Friday he told me that as I was having a really good week, I could work both the Saturday and Sunday. If I recall, I was meant to be finishing on the Friday, and if I could sell 5 cars over these 2 days, I wouldn't be fired. This was not a realistic target, but I'd accepted the challenge, mainly because this was my dream job. Bully or not, this was still my dream job, and I would do everything I can to remain in that job, even if it involved me working for a bully. So I accepted the challenge and actually managed 2 sales on both the Saturday and the Sunday. But in his office, he told me it wasn't enough and that I'd failed the challenge. He then held his hand out with a smug grin on his face. And while I never swore, I told him I wouldn't be shaking his hand. I knew he had a temper, but evidence is bullying. He told me that he would actually beat me up unless I shook his hand. I would have absolutely got him done if he'd attacked me. I wouldn't have retaliated, but I didn't want to be beaten up, so I shook his hand. So that's the first of the bullying, the more serious one, but back in the reality is back in the early 90s, I mean, I had an ashtray on my desk. You could smoke at work. Um, Issues such as racism, sexism, all these sort of things were rife. It was a different era, but it certainly doesn't make it right. And bullying in the workplace is never right. It's never right at all. So I'll move on to the second part. Um, okay, so I was lucky to have noticed a similar role within a second job. This was a top up job just to help my finances, and I'd been working in a horrible job in Lanarkshire in the Airdrie area, but very nice people who many of them are going to be friends, possibly for a lifetime, who run a Facebook and what have you. This was a telecommunications job. So I was lucky to have noticed much the same job advertised, but instead of being in Lanarkshire, it was in the Scottish borders, and this was through an outsourcing company. I sailed through the interview, although I did get the feeling that almost everyone would pass the interview. Just to put a timeline on this, and this is page 100 through to about 102, 103 in the book, but just to put a timeline here, this was about 2017-ish, round about that time. So it was about 2016, 2017. So it was fairly recently, depending on when you're watching this, of course. So I sailed through the interview, although I got the feeling that almost everyone would pass the interview. The recruiter, Samantha, was so nice, though, and I felt really valued. I was so pleased to be able to leave the Lanarkshire job. I went in for my shift and I would be starting a new job in a week's time. My manager asked if I wanted to do the week's notice or just leave. That was the manager in Lanarkshire. I said that I could do the week if she wanted, but she said it was totally my shout. So I did that day's shift and just left. Because all my friends had already left, apart from one person, Mariam, who was on a totally different shift. Nobody actually said bye at the end of my last shift. While it had only been 6 months, it was sad in some ways that you can be so invisible. So I had a week before starting the new part-time job. I mentioned to my boss at my main job about the new job and the impact of my training. I'd now moved to a tougher shift in terms of the hours I worked were 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., although it was a better shift in terms of employee satisfaction. And I was pleased to join John's team in the main job, as I'd known him for around 20 years and was already good friends with Graham, who I'd known for the same length of time. And I knew a lot of the rest of the team, such as Lisa and Stephen, who I knew, um, both of them for close to 20 years anyway. So this immediately helped me relax and feel more secure. That's my main job, but this story is based on my second job, so it wasn't quite as serious because it was my second job, but again, bullying in the workplace is never acceptable, regardless of where and when. So my boss in the main job was also sort of okay, even with the full-time training, because he knew it was only going to be for 2 weeks. But this meant it was about an 80-hour working week. 80. 2 full-time jobs the first 2 weeks of the shift in the new job. It meant hardly any sleep, but somehow I just about got through this. Day 2 in training in the new job, I was 10 minutes late, and they were meant to have a 3 strikes and you're out policy. The trainer said how much he hated lateness, but I did pull him aside later that day explaining my predicament and said that I hoped this would just be a one off, but I couldn't promise that. He was appreciative that I'd told him about my circumstances and assured me he would be a bit more flexible with me, which was decent of him, especially as it was my issue and not his or the company's, because I'd made the choice to work full time at my main job and full time for 2 weeks, knowing I was going to then be part time. But I had to commit to that to um, be kept on essentially and do the full training. I was lucky to have had some skills and knowledge from the other telecoms job, and I muddled through the training half asleep, but I felt I still had a fairly good understanding. The trainers were good, fun people. There was a good balance of having a laugh and serious job stuff. We then went onto a floor walked environment. There wasn't really the spirit within the training group of new starts that there had been in the Lanarkshire job. There were 4 people meant to be doing the same shift as me, but a few weeks into the job, 2 of them had already left, leaving just me and Sarah. She was in a different team, but at weekends we would sit next to each other to help each other out. It was a bit better than Lanarkshire. Supervisors did try to help staff more, and there was more acceptance for things like manager callbacks, but it was still not a great place to work. I had an incident of intimidation from one of the managers. I could have taken it further, but I did raise an informal complaint. The manager kept repeating, "You've been in rap for 5 minutes. You've been in rap for 5 minutes. You've been in rap for 5 minutes." Each time he said it louder and louder, pointing at me. I never understood whether he was being serious in his conduct and if it was some sort of practical joke. I never got an apology, but I said I wouldn't turn it into a grievance as long as it didn't happen again. I'd been working there actually at the point of writing this book, and I'd worked there for about a year and a half. And I did remind my boss actually that it had been almost a year since I last had any feedback whatsoever. It wasn't my direct boss that approached me in that intimidating and bullying fashion. It was a manager from a different team. But this has since been resolved after Danny took over the team. He was quite like minded and a people ahead of process person. And this probably kept me there as the extra money was handy, although no longer needed. Until Danny took over, I felt invisible, and on some shifts, I didn't have any interaction with any other staff. I just came in, took calls, and went home. No development, no atmosphere, just another horrible, gloomy call centre. And this was especially after my good friend Sarah left, who'd done some cleaning for me and things as well, so she became a really good friend from my training group. The second job, however, did still serve its purpose financially, and that's really it. So that's the 2 sort of scenarios within bullying in the workplace. Like I say, I'm also a trade union rep for GMB Union. I'm involved in disability at work through both the union and something called the DAWN network, which stands for Disability and Wellness Network. I'm actually on the committee within my organisation. I only have the one job now, so I'm involved in making sure the workplace is fair for fellow employees and what have you, through the trade union and the Dawn network. I'm also Dyslexia and Dyspraxia champion within the global organisation that I work for. It doesn't take up a huge length of time, but again, it's nice to know that I'm there for fellow employees and what have you. So I'm hoping to share this on some dyslexia, Facebook groups and what have you, but it'll link in with the YouTube channel. I do hope this longer reading has been useful, as it's such an important area to talk about, and it's important people share their experience in, because bullying in the workplace is totally unacceptable, especially threats of physical violence and intimidation and things like that. And if I can help anyone, even if I don't know you, I'm here to do my best to help you. But I do hope you enjoy that, find it interesting, and find it useful. Thanks very much, and have a lovely rest of the bank holiday weekend. Stay safe as ever, and do what you need to do based on the current situation within the United Kingdom. All the best. Thank you. Bye.